Canine dog barks at nurse carrying newborn. What was hidden in her bag stunned the hospital. What happened next will shock you beyond belief. A trained police dog's instincts uncovered a hospital secret so dark that it changed everything forever. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us where you're listening from. We love hearing from our amazing community worldwide. The story you're about to listen to started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning at St. Mary's Community Hospital. The pediatric ward hummed with its usual quiet energy as nurses moved through their early shift routines. Fluorescent lights cast their familiar glow across polished floors, and the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with the gentle sounds of machines monitoring tiny patients. Officer Jake Martinez walked slowly down the hallway, his boots making soft echoes against the linoleum. Beside him, his 4-year-old German Shepherd, Rex, padded silently with alert ears and watchful eyes. Rex wasn't just any dog, he was a retired canine unit with an incredible record. His nose had detected everything from hidden drugs to missing persons during his 5 years of active service. Now, even in retirement, Rex still accompanied Jake on community visits and security checks. The hospital had requested their presence after receiving anonymous threats the previous week. Someone had called the main desk 3 times, claiming they would expose the truth about what happens to the children. Hospital Administrator Dr. Patricia Wells wasn't taking any chances. She'd asked Jake to do routine sweeps with Rex, hoping the dog's trained senses might pick up anything unusual. Jake paused near the nurse's station, chatting quietly with the head nurse about the weekend's security concerns. Rex sat patiently, his dark eyes scanning the corridor with professional attention. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until it wasn't. Down the hall, a woman in scrubs emerged from room 314. Emma Thompson had worked at St. Mary's for 8 years. She was known for her gentle touch with children and her quiet, reserved nature. The other nurses respected her dedication, though some found her a bit distant. Emma rarely joined their conversations during breaks, preferring to spend her time reading medical journals or writing in a small notebook she always carried. In her arms, she held a 5-year-old boy named Luke. The child looked drowsy, his head resting against Emma's shoulder as she carried him toward the elevator. Luke had been staying in the pediatric ward for routine observation after a minor surgery. His father was waiting downstairs to take him home. It should have been a simple discharge, a happy ending to a successful treatment. Emma's canvas medical bag hung from her shoulder, bouncing slightly as she walked. The bag looked ordinary enough, the same type carried by dozens of hospital staff every day. It contained the usual supplies, stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, thermometer, and various medical instruments. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But Rex had other ideas. The moment Emma passed within 10 feet of him, Rex's entire body went rigid. His ears snapped forward, and a low growl rumbled deep in his throat. Jake looked down surprised. Rex never reacted like this without good reason. "Easy, boy," Jake whispered, placing a gentle hand on Rex's head. "What is it?" Emma continued walking, seemingly unaware of the dog's reaction. Luke shifted slightly in her arms, mumbling something sleepy about wanting to see his dad. Emma whispered back, her voice soft and soothing, telling him they were almost there. Rex stood up, his growl growing louder. The hair along his spine began to rise. Jake had seen this behavior before. It meant Rex had detected something dangerous, something that set off every alarm in his trained canine brain. "Ma'am," Jake called out, taking a few steps toward Emma. "Could you hold on just a moment?" Emma stopped and turned around. Her face showed mild confusion, but Jake noticed something else in her expression, a flicker of what looked like fear. Her grip on Luke tightened slightly. "Is there a problem, officer?" Emma asked, her voice steady but with a slight tremor underneath. Rex was now straining against his leash, focused entirely on Emma's medical bag. He barked once, sharp and urgent. The sound echoed through the hallway, causing several nurses to look up from their work. "I'm not sure," Jake replied honestly. "Rex here seems to be reacting to something. He's a trained detection dog, and he's never wrong about these things." Emma shifted Luke to her other arm, the movement causing her bag to swing slightly. Rex's barking intensified immediately. His focus was laser sharp on that canvas bag, as if he could see through the fabric to whatever lay hidden inside. "I'm just taking Luke down to meet his father," Emma explained, taking a small step backward. "We're running a bit late for his discharge appointment." The head nurse, Martha Stevens, approached from the nurse's station. She'd worked with Emma for years and had never seen her look so uncomfortable. Emma, honey, is everything all right? You look a little pale. Luke stirred in Emma's arms, opening his sleepy eyes to look at the commotion around him. Why is the doggy barking? He asked in his small voice. Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, Emma said quickly, her voice softening as she spoke to the child. The doggy is just saying hello. We'll be downstairs with your daddy in just a minute. But Rex wasn't saying hello. His barking had taken on an almost frantic quality. He was pulling against his leash now, trying to get closer to Emma's bag. Jake had never seen his partner react this intensely to anything that wasn't an immediate threat. Dr. Wells appeared from around the corner, drawn by the noise. Her face showed concern as she took in the scene, the barking dog, the nervous nurse, and the small crowd that was beginning to gather. What's going on here? Dr. Wells asked, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension. Jake explained Rex's behavior while keeping his eyes on Emma. The nurse was shifting her weight from foot to foot, her breathing becoming more rapid. Sweat had formed on her forehead despite the cool hospital air. I really need to get Luke downstairs, Emma said, her voice becoming more urgent. His father has been waiting, and we don't want to worry him. Rex barked again, this time lunging forward with such force that Jake had to brace himself to keep control of the leash. The dog's attention was completely fixed on the medical bag. His nose pointed directly at it, his body language screaming that whatever was inside posed a serious threat. Dr. Wells stepped closer, her expression growing more serious. Emma, I think we need to figure out what's got Rex so worked up. Would you mind if we took a look at your bag? The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Emma's face went completely white. Her hands began to tremble slightly, causing Luke to look up at her, with worry in his young eyes. There's nothing unusual in my bag, Emma said, but her voice cracked on the last word. Just my normal supplies. I don't understand why the dog is acting this way. Martha placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. Honey, you're shaking. What's wrong? You can tell us. For a moment, Emma looked like she might collapse. Her eyes darted around the group of faces surrounding her. Jake's determined expression, Dr. Wells' growing suspicion, Martha's genuine concern, and Rex's unwavering focus on her bag. Luke began to sense the tension. Miss Emma, he said quietly, are you scared? You're holding me really tight. Emma looked down at the little boy in her arms, and something in her expression shifted. Tears began to form in her eyes. I'm sorry, Luke, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The apology sent a chill through everyone present. Why was she apologizing? What did she have to be sorry for? Rex's barking suddenly stopped. The silence was somehow more unsettling than the noise had been. The dog remained focused on the bag, his body tense and ready, but his ears had tilted forward in a way that suggested he was listening for something. Jake's radio crackled to life. Unit 47, we have reports of a missing child from the downtown area. 5-year-old girl, last seen wearing a pink dress. Suspect vehicle spotted near the hospital district. The timing of the radio call felt like more than coincidence. Jake looked at Emma with new eyes, noticing details he'd missed before. Her scrubs were wrinkled, as if she'd been wearing them for much longer than a normal shift. Her shoes showed mud stains that seemed fresh. Most concerning of all, her medical bag looked heavier than it should be, pulling at her shoulder in a way that suggested it contained more than standard supplies. Emma, Dr. Wells said, her voice now carrying the full weight of authority, I need you to put Luke down and show us what's in your bag. Right now. Emma's breath came in quick, shallow gasps. She looked around the circle of faces again, then down at Luke, who had started to look frightened by all the attention. You don't understand, Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't have a choice. They would have hurt him. The words hit the group like a physical blow. Martha gasped, stepping backward. Dr. Wells immediately moved closer, her medical training kicking in as she assessed both Emma's mental state and Luke's well-being. Who would have hurt him? Jake asked, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. Emma, talk to me. What's really going on here? Rex whined softly, a sound that somehow conveyed more urgency than his barking had. The dog's eyes moved between Emma's face and her bag, as if he understood that whatever was hidden inside was connected to the fear and desperation written across the nurse's features. Emma closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, tears were streaming down her cheeks. The bag, she said in a broken whisper. Look in the bag, but promise me you'll protect him. Promise me Luke will be safe. The hallway fell completely silent, except for the distant sounds of the hospital continuing its work. Machines beeping, phones ringing, people living their normal lives while something extraordinary and terrifying unfolded in their midst. Jake reached out slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. "I'm going to take the bag now, Emma. Just let it slide off your shoulder. Nice and easy." Emma nodded, unable to speak. The canvas bag slipped from her shoulder and into Jake's waiting hands. The moment the bag left Emma's possession, Rex sat back on his haunches, his alert posture relaxing slightly. Whatever danger he'd sensed was no longer in motion. Dr. Wells gently took Luke from Emma's arms. The little boy looked confused but didn't protest. "It's okay, sweetheart," she told him. "We're just going to make sure everything is safe." Jake set the bag on a nearby cart and began to open it. His hands moved methodically, removing the standard medical equipment from the top compartments. Stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, thermometer. Everything looked normal at first glance. But Rex's attention hadn't wavered. The dog's nose followed Jake's movements, and when Jake's hand reached the bottom of the bag, Rex's ears perked up again. Jake's fingers found something unusual, a seam in the bag's lining that didn't belong there. It was cleverly concealed, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. His police training kicked in as he carefully worked the hidden compartment open. What he found inside would change everything they thought they knew about Emma Thompson, about Luke, and about the dark secrets that St. Mary's Community Hospital had been hiding for years. Inside the false bottom of the bag were 3 items that made no sense together, but told a story more frightening than anyone could have imagined. First, a set of syringes unlike any medical equipment Jake had ever seen. They were smaller than normal, with unusual markings along the sides. Second, 2 glass vials filled with a clear liquid and labeled with symbols instead of words. And third, something that made Jake's blood run cold, a small electronic device with a blinking red light and what looked like a GPS tracking screen. Emma collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor with her head in her hands. "I tried to save him," she sobbed. "I tried to get him out before they could finish what they started." Martha knelt beside Emma, her nursing instincts overriding her shock. "Finish what? Emma, honey, you need to tell us what's happening." But Emma could only repeat the same words over and over. "I had no choice. They would have hurt him. I had no choice." Jake looked at the mysterious items in his hands, then at Luke, who was watching everything with the wide-eyed confusion of a child who knows something is very wrong but can't understand what. Rex remained alert, his gaze now shifting between the items from the bag and the corridor behind them, as if he sensed that whatever danger Emma had been trying to escape was still out there, still hunting. Dr. Wells reached for her radio to call security, but Jake held up a hand to stop her. Something told him that bringing more people into this situation right now might not be safe, not until they understood exactly what they were dealing with and who they could trust. The morning that had started so normally had become something else entirely, and as Jake looked at the fear in Emma's eyes and the innocent confusion on Luke's face, he realized that Rex's barking had been more than just an alert about hidden objects. It had been a warning that they were all standing at the edge of something much bigger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Jake carefully placed the mysterious items on the medical cart, his police training telling him to preserve everything as evidence, while his human instincts screamed that they needed answers immediately. The syringes caught the fluorescent light in a way that made them look almost alien. The clear liquid in the vials seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it contained something more than just medicine. And that tracking device, its red light blinked steadily, like a heartbeat counting down to something terrible. Dr. Wells kept her arm protectively around Luke, who had begun to sense the gravity of the situation. The little boy's eyes moved between the adults' worried faces and the strange objects that had come from Emma's bag. "What are those?" he asked in his small voice. "Are they to help sick people get better?" The innocence of the question hit everyone like a punch to the chest. Martha wiped tears from her eyes as she continued to kneel beside Emma, who had fallen into a shocked silence. Her sobs had stopped, replaced by a hollow stare that suggested she was seeing something far beyond the hospital hallway. "Emma," Jake said gently, crouching down to her level, "I need you to focus on me. Can you do that?" He waited until her eyes met his. "Good. Now, I need you to tell me what these things are and why you had them in your bag." Emma's lips moved silently for a moment before any sound came out. "The syringes," she whispered. "They're not from this hospital. They're from the lab downstairs, the one that doesn't officially exist." Dr. Wells frowned. "What lab?" "Emma, we don't have any unauthorized labs in this building." A bitter laugh escaped Emma's throat, You don't know about it because you're not supposed to know. None of the regular staff are. It's in the sub-basement, behind the maintenance rooms. They told me it was for advanced pediatric research, funded by private donors who wanted to remain anonymous. Jake felt Rex tense beside him. The dog's nose was working overtime, processing scents that human senses couldn't detect. Rex moved closer to Luke, positioning himself between the child and the corridor leading to the elevators, as if he instinctively knew that danger might come from that direction. "Who told you about this lab?" Jake pressed. "Who gave you these syringes?" Emma closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a different kind of fear. Not the panic from being caught, but the deep terror of someone who had seen things that would haunt her forever. Dr. Vincent Cross. He runs the special program. He said Luke was part of a longitudinal study that began when he was born, something about neurological development and enhanced cognitive abilities. The words sent a chill through the small group. Dr. Wells pulled Luke closer to her, her medical mind already racing through the implications. Enhanced cognitive abilities? Emma, that's not possible. We don't have any research programs like that here. Because you're not meant to know, Emma repeated, her voice growing stronger with each word. Dr. Cross has been running this program for 5 years. Luke isn't the only child involved. There are others. Children who were born here, whose parents died or gave them up for adoption. Children who had no one to ask questions about why they needed to come back for so many routine checkups. Jake's radio crackled again. Unit 47, any update on your location? We're still looking for that missing child. The mention of another missing child made Jake's stomach turn. He looked at the tracking device with its blinking red light and felt pieces of a horrible puzzle beginning to fall into place. Emma, is this tracking device monitoring Luke? Emma nodded miserably. Every child in the program has one. They're told it's a medical monitor, something to help doctors keep track of their health remotely, but it's really so Dr. Cross and his team always know where they are. Martha gasped. That's illegal. That's kidnapping and illegal experimentation on children. I know, Emma said, her voice breaking again. I've known for months. But Dr. Cross has connections everywhere. Hospital administration, local police, social services. He made it clear that if I tried to expose the program, no one would believe me, and the children would disappear. Rex suddenly lifted his head, his ears rotating toward the sound of footsteps coming down the hallway. His low growl returned, and Jake immediately went on high alert. Someone was approaching, and Rex's reaction suggested it wasn't friendly. We need to move, Jake said urgently. Emma, is there somewhere safe we can go? Somewhere away from this Dr. Cross and his people? But before Emma could answer, a voice called out from down the hallway. Good morning, everyone. I heard there was some commotion up here. The man walking toward them looked like any other doctor. White coat, stethoscope around his neck, confident stride. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Everything about him suggested competence and authority, but Rex's reaction told a different story. The dog's hackles were fully raised now, and he was moving to place himself directly between this newcomer and Luke. Dr. Cross, Emma whispered, her face going pale again. How did you know we were here? Dr. Cross smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The tracking device, of course. When Luke's monitor showed he was moving through the hospital instead of heading home, I became concerned. Hello, Luke. How are you feeling today? Luke pressed closer to Dr. Wells, suddenly shy. I'm okay, he said quietly, but everyone seems worried about something. Well, children often pick up on adult emotions, Dr. Cross said, his tone remaining pleasant and professional. Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting. My office would be perfect for a conversation about Luke's ongoing care. Jake stepped forward, his hand resting on his service weapon. I don't think that's necessary, Doctor. We're handling this situation. Dr. Cross's smile faded slightly. Officer, I'm not sure you understand the delicate nature of Luke's medical situation. He's part of a very specialized treatment program. Any disruption to his care could have serious consequences. Like what kind of consequences? Dr. Wells asked, her protective instincts fully engaged. What exactly are you treating him for? That's confidential patient information, Dr. Cross replied smoothly. I'm sure you understand the importance of medical privacy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take Luke for his scheduled appointment. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding. The sound echoed off the walls like a gunshot. and several other hospital staff members looked up from their workstations. Jake noticed that some of them looked nervous, as if they recognized Dr. Cross and weren't happy to see him. "Nobody's going anywhere until we sort this out," Jake said firmly. "Emma, you mentioned other children. How many others?" Emma looked terrified to answer, with Dr. Cross standing right there, but Martha squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Tell them, honey. It's time for the truth." 7, Emma whispered. "There are 7 children in the program currently. Luke is the oldest. The youngest is only 2 years old." Dr. Cross's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Emma, you're clearly having some kind of emotional breakdown. Perhaps you should take some time off and get the help you need." "I'm not crazy," Emma said, finding her voice again, "and I'm not going to let you hurt these children anymore." Jake pulled out his phone and quickly texted his supervisor, requesting backup and a warrant to search the hospital's sub-basement. But as he was typing, Dr. Cross made a subtle gesture toward the nurses' station. Jake caught the movement out of the corner of his eye and noticed that 2 security guards were now walking toward them. But these weren't the regular hospital security guards Jake had met earlier. These men were larger, more intimidating, and they moved with the precision of people who had military or law enforcement training. Their uniforms looked official, but something about them felt wrong. Rex noticed them too. The dog's attention split between Dr. Cross and the approaching guards, his body language indicating that he viewed all of them as threats. "Dr. Cross," one of the guards said as they approached, "is there a problem here?" "Just a misunderstanding about one of our special patients," Dr. Cross replied. "Officer Martinez here seems to have some concerns about Luke's treatment, but I think we can resolve this quietly." The way he emphasized quietly sounded more like a threat than a suggestion. Jake's cop instincts were screaming that this situation was about to escalate, and they were outnumbered. "Actually," Jake said loudly, making sure his voice carried to other hospital staff nearby, "I think we need to involve more people in this conversation, starting with real hospital administration and child protective services." Dr. Cross's face hardened. "Officer, I'm afraid you're interfering with legitimate medical treatment. These children are under my care, and I have full legal authority over their treatment plans." "Show me the paperwork," Jake demanded. "Show me the legal guardianship documents, the treatment authorizations, everything." For the first time, Dr. Cross hesitated. That hesitation was all Jake needed to know that something was very, very wrong with this entire situation. Luke, who had been quietly watching the adults argue, suddenly spoke up. "Dr. Cross, why do I have to take the special medicine that makes me sleepy? The other kids at school don't have to take medicine like that." The innocent question hit like a bomb. Dr. Wells tightened her grip on Luke protectively. "What special medicine, sweetheart?" "The shots that Dr. Cross gives me every week," Luke explained. "They make me really tired, and sometimes I have strange dreams. Dreams about things that haven't happened yet." Emma let out a sob. "That's what I was trying to tell you. The syringes in my bag, they contain the experimental serum Dr. Cross has been giving to all the children. It's supposed to enhance their cognitive abilities, but it's causing side effects, hallucinations, memory problems, behavioral changes." Dr. Cross stepped forward, his friendly mask completely gone now. "Emma, you're violating your confidentiality agreement. There will be serious consequences for this breach." "I don't care about consequences anymore," Emma said, standing up with Martha's help. "These children deserve to be protected. Luke deserves to have a normal childhood, not to be someone's lab rat." Rex moved between Dr. Cross and the others, his stance making it clear that he wouldn't allow the doctor to get any closer to Luke. The dog's protective instincts had taken over completely. Jake made a decision. He activated his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need immediate backup at St. Mary's Community Hospital, Pediatric Ward. We have a situation involving possible child endangerment and illegal medical experimentation. Also request child protective services and a warrant to search hospital sub-basement areas." The radio call seemed to galvanize Dr. Cross. He nodded to his security guards, who began moving closer. "Officer Martinez, you're making a serious mistake. You have no idea what you're interfering with." "Then explain it to me," Jake challenged. "Tell me why you're giving experimental drugs to children without proper oversight. Tell me why you're tracking them like animals. Tell me why a trained police dog is treating you like a threat." Dr. Cross glanced at Rex, and for a moment, something like fear flashed across his face. Animals can be unreliable, he said carefully. They sometimes react to things that aren't really threats. But Rex's behavior suggested otherwise. The dog was focused on Dr. Cross with the same intensity he'd shown toward Emma's bag, as if he could sense something dangerous about the man that the humans couldn't detect. Martha had been listening to everything with growing horror. Dr. Cross, I've worked at this hospital for 15 years. I've never heard of any of these programs you're talking about. Where are the ethics committee approvals? Where are the informed consent forms from the parents? The parents are no longer in the picture, Dr. Cross said coldly. These children were legally placed in the care of the hospital through proper channels. Everything we're doing is completely legal. Then why the secrecy? Dr. Wells demanded. Why the hidden lab? Why the tracking devices? Dr. Cross looked around at the small crowd that had gathered. Other hospital staff members were watching now, drawn by the raised voices and the presence of the police dog. Some of them looked curious, but others looked worried, as if they knew more about what was happening than they wanted to admit. Because, Dr. Cross said finally, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting would have, the work we're doing is revolutionary. We're creating the future of human cognitive development, but small minds can't understand the bigger picture. They get caught up in outdated ethical concerns instead of seeing the incredible potential. Luke looked up at Dr. Wells with confusion. What does that mean? Am I sick? Is that why I have to take the medicine? Dr. Wells knelt down to Luke's eye level. No, sweetheart, you're not sick. Some people just made some very bad decisions about your care, but we're going to make sure you're safe now. Rex suddenly alerted again, his attention turning toward the elevator bank. The doors were opening, and Jake could hear multiple footsteps approaching. His backup was arriving, but so was someone else. A woman in an expensive suit stepped out of the elevator, flanked by two men in dark suits who looked more like government agents than hospital administrators. She walked with the confidence of someone used to being in charge, and her eyes immediately found Dr. Cross. "Doctor," she said in a crisp, authoritative voice, "we have a problem." Dr. Cross's face went white. "Ms. Reynolds, I have everything under control." "Clearly you don't," Ms. Reynolds replied, her gaze taking in the crowd of hospital staff, the police officer, and the clearly agitated child. "The situation has been compromised. We need to implement containment protocols immediately." Jake didn't like the sound of containment protocols at all. He moved closer to Luke and Dr. Wells, with Rex maintaining his protective position between them and the newcomers. "Who are you?" Jake demanded. "And what kind of containment protocols are you talking about?" Ms. Reynolds smiled, but it was the cold smile of a predator. "I'm Sarah Reynolds, Director of Special Projects for Meridian Research Institute. We're the organization funding Dr. Cross's important work here. As for containment protocols, let's just say we have ways of ensuring that sensitive research doesn't become public prematurely." Emma grabbed Martha's arm. "This is what I was afraid of," she whispered. "They have people everywhere. Police, social services, hospital administration. They can make problems disappear." Rex was now growling continuously, a low rumble that spoke of barely contained aggression. The dog's instincts were telling him that everyone who had arrived with Ms. Reynolds represented a threat to the people he was protecting. Jake's radio crackled. "Unit 47, backup is en route. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes suddenly seemed like a very long time. But what none of them realized was that Rex had detected something else in that mysterious bag. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about Luke, about the hospital, and about the true scope of the conspiracy they had stumbled into. The tracking device wasn't just monitoring Luke's location. It was connected to something much bigger, something that would reveal the most shocking truth of all. Jake's mind raced as he tried to process everything that was happening. 3 minutes for backup to arrive, but he wasn't even sure anymore if he could trust whoever showed up. Ms. Reynolds and her men looked like they had resources and connections that went far beyond a simple hospital research program. This felt bigger than anything he'd encountered in his years as a police officer. Rex suddenly moved away from his protective position near Luke and began sniffing around the medical cart where Jake had placed the items from Emma's bag. The dog's behavior had shifted again. Instead of aggressive alerting, he now seemed to be searching for something specific. His nose worked methodically over each item, but when he reached the tracking device, he sat down and looked directly at Jake. "He's trying to tell us something," Dr. Wells observed, still keeping Luke close to her side. Jake picked up the tracking device, studying its blinking red light more carefully. The screen was small, but he could make out what looked like a map with multiple dots scattered across it. Each dot pulsed with the same red light, and numbers appeared next to them. "Emma," Jake said urgently, "how many children did you say were in this program?" "7," Emma repeated, her voice barely audible under Ms. Reynolds' intimidating stare. Jake counted the dots on the screen. There were 9, 2 more children than Emma knew about. "Dr. Cross," Jake said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when arresting suspects. "There are 9 locations showing on this device. Emma only knows about 7 children. Where are the other 2? Dr. Cross exchanged a worried glance with Ms. Reynolds. For the first time since this confrontation began, he looked genuinely rattled. "Officer, you're misreading the device. Some of those signals could be from equipment, not children." But Jake wasn't buying it. He'd spent enough time around liars to recognize one. "Then you won't mind if we check each location to verify that?" Ms. Reynolds stepped forward, her calm demeanor beginning to crack. "Officer Martinez, you're interfering with a federal research project. I have the authority to have you removed from these premises immediately." "Federal?" Jake repeated. "Funny, because I called for backup from the local police, not federal agents. So either you're lying about your authority, or this situation is even worse than I thought." Rex moved closer to Luke again, but this time his attention was focused on something else entirely. The dog began sniffing around Luke's clothing, his ears perked with interest. When he reached Luke's left arm, Rex sat down and whined softly. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, moving closer. Luke looked down at his arm, then up at the adults around him. "Oh, that's where Dr. Cross gave me my shot yesterday. It still hurts a little bit." Dr. Wells immediately knelt down and gently pushed up Luke's sleeve. What she found made her gasp. There was indeed a small injection site, but it wasn't alone. Running up Luke's forearm were tiny, almost invisible scars, evidence of multiple injections over time. "My God," Dr. Wells whispered, "how long has this been going on?" Emma closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "Since he was 2 years old. Dr. Cross said it was a routine vaccination program, but the injections were monthly, sometimes weekly, much more frequent than any normal medical treatment." Martha looked sick. 3 years of experimental drugs on a child? What kind of monster does something like that? Luke looked confused by all the attention his arm was receiving. "Is something wrong with my shots? They told me they were vitamins to help me grow big and strong." The innocence in his voice made everyone's heart break. This little boy had been trusting the adults in his life to take care of him, and instead they had been using him as a test subject. Ms. Reynolds tried to regain control of the situation. "Dr. Cross, I think it's time we move to the secure location. The situation here has become untenable." "Nobody's going anywhere," Jake said firmly, positioning himself between Ms. Reynolds and Luke. "Not until we get some real answers." Rex suddenly alerted again, but this time his attention was focused down the hallway where they had come from. His ears swiveled toward the sound of approaching footsteps, multiple sets, moving quickly and with purpose. Jake's backup was arriving, but so was someone else. The elevator dinged, and more people in suits began emerging. But these weren't police officers or hospital administrators. They moved with military precision, and Jake noticed that several of them had earpieces and the kind of coordinated movement that suggested tactical training. "Jake Martinez, you need to step away from the child immediately," one of the new arrivals called out. He was a large man with graying hair and the bearing of someone used to command. "I'm Agent Wilson, Department of Health and Human Services. We're here to ensure the safety of all parties involved." But Rex wasn't buying it. The dog's hackles rose again, and he began barking with renewed intensity. His protective instincts were in full overdrive, and he clearly viewed these newcomers as threats rather than help. "HHS doesn't travel with tactical teams," Jake observed, noting the way the so-called agents were positioning themselves around the group. "And they definitely don't respond to local police calls about missing children." Agent Wilson smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Officer Martinez, you've stumbled into something that's classified at the highest levels. For national security reasons, I need you to turn over any evidence you have collected and step away from this situation." "National security?" Dr. Wells stood up, still keeping Luke behind her. "What kind of national security interest involves experimenting on children?" Emma found her voice again, speaking with growing desperation. "They told me the program was about creating enhanced intelligence for future generations." They said the children would grow up to be geniuses, able to solve problems that normal people couldn't handle, but I started to see what it was really doing to them. What kind of effects? Jake demanded, keeping his hand near his weapon as more of Wilson's people spread out around them. Memory problems, Emma said, her words tumbling out faster now, as if she knew her time to speak was running out. Behavioral changes. Some of the children started having seizures. Others began showing signs of premature aging. And the dreams. They all reported having vivid dreams about things that hadn't happened yet. Luke looked up at Dr. Wells with worry. Is that bad? I have dreams like that all the time. Sometimes I dream about things, and then they happen the next day. The admission sent a chill through everyone present. Dr. Wells looked at Luke with new eyes, her medical training helping her understand the horrific implications of what Emma was describing. Precognitive abilities, Dr. Cross said, his voice filled with scientific excitement despite the dangerous situation. The neural enhancement serum has been more successful than we ever hoped. Luke and the other children aren't just more intelligent, they're developing capabilities that could revolutionize human potential. At what cost? Martha demanded. You're talking about destroying their childhoods, their health, their normal development. Agent Wilson gestured to his team, and they began moving closer. This conversation ends now. Dr. Cross, Ms. Reynolds, we're implementing extraction protocols. Rex positioned himself directly in front of Luke, his entire body radiating protective aggression. The dog had clearly decided that everyone except Jake, Dr. Wells, Martha, and Emma represented a threat to the child he was guarding. Jake made a split-second decision. He grabbed the tracking device and quickly scrolled through its menu, looking for any information that might help them. What he found made his blood run cold. The device wasn't just tracking the children's locations. It was monitoring their vital signs, brain activity, and something labeled as cognitive enhancement levels. But most disturbing of all was a section marked Termination Protocols, with a countdown timer that was currently inactive. Emma, Jake said urgently, what happens to children who don't respond well to the treatments? Emma's face went white. They disappear. Dr. Cross says they're transferred to a different facility for specialized care, but I don't think that's true. I think they're eliminated when they become liabilities. The word eliminated hung in the air like a death sentence. Luke was listening to everything, and his young mind was beginning to understand that the adults who had been taking care of him weren't the good people he thought they were. I want to go home, Luke said quietly, tears beginning to form in his eyes. I want my real daddy. Dr. Cross's mask slipped completely. Your real daddy signed you over to us when you were born, Luke. He couldn't handle raising a special child like you. That's a lie, Emma said fiercely. Luke's father never signed anything. I was there when Luke was born. His father died in a car accident 2 weeks later, and his mother died from complications during delivery. Dr. Cross took custody by claiming Luke was part of a state program for orphaned children. Agent Wilson nodded to his team again. Enough. We're taking the child into protective custody immediately. But Rex had other ideas. The dog moved to block their path, his growl deepening to a sound that promised violence if anyone tried to get past him. Jake's radio crackled with his backup finally arriving, but he wasn't sure if he could trust anyone at this point. The conspiracy seemed to reach into every level of authority. Officer Martinez, Agent Wilson said, his voice taking on a threatening tone, you're interfering with a federal operation. Stand down immediately or face charges of obstructing justice and endangering national security. Show me your warrant, Jake demanded. Show me the legal paperwork that gives you authority to take this child. For a moment, Wilson hesitated. That hesitation told Jake everything he needed to know about the legitimacy of this operation. Luke suddenly spoke up, his young voice cutting through the tension. I remember something, he said, looking confused. I had a dream about this, about the dog and the people in suits and someone getting hurt. Emma knelt down to Luke's level. What else do you remember from your dreams, sweetheart? Luke's eyes grew wide with fear. The bad people try to take me away, but something stops them. Something about a secret that the dog finds. Rex suddenly moved away from his protective position and went back to the medical cart. He began pawing at something that had fallen beneath it, a small piece of paper that must have dropped when Jake was examining the contents of Emma's bag. Jake picked up the paper and unfolded it. It was a handwritten note in Emma's careful script. Research files hidden in morgue freezer number 7, video evidence of experiments, children's real identities and medical records. Dr. Cross's contact with overseas buyers. The note revealed the true scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just unethical medical research. It was human trafficking on an international scale. Ms. Reynolds saw Jake reading the note, and her composed facade finally cracked completely. "Wilson, we need to contain this situation immediately. All witnesses." The phrase "all witnesses" carried an unmistakable threat. Jake realized that they weren't planning to just take Luke. They were planning to eliminate everyone who had learned about the program. Rex seemed to sense the escalating danger. The dog's body language shifted from protective to aggressive, and Jake could see him preparing to defend his charges at any cost. "Emma," Jake said quietly, "is there another way out of this ward?" Emma nodded toward a door marked "Staff Only" at the far end of the hallway. "Emergency stairs. They lead directly to the parking garage." But between them and that door were Wilson's tactical team, who were now openly reaching for weapons concealed under their suit jackets. Luke looked up at all the adults around him, his enhanced intelligence allowing him to understand far more than a normal 5-year-old would. "They're going to hurt us, aren't they?" he asked simply. Dr. Wells pulled him closer. "Not if we can help it, sweetheart." Rex made his decision. The dog suddenly charged toward Agent Wilson's team, barking with ferocious intensity. The men scattered momentarily, giving Jake the opening he needed. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Luke's hand while Dr. Wells and Martha helped Emma to her feet. They raced toward the emergency exit with Rex clearing their path, the dog's training and protective instincts making him an unstoppable force. Behind them, they could hear Wilson shouting orders and the sound of heavy footsteps in pursuit. As they reached the stairwell door, Emma grabbed Jake's arm. "There's something else," she gasped. "Something I didn't tell you about Luke. He's not just enhanced. He's the most successful subject they've ever had. Dr. Cross calls him the prototype for the future of humanity. They'll never stop hunting him." The stairwell door slammed shut behind them, just as they heard the first gunshot echo through the hospital hallway. Rex had bought them time, but Jake knew it wouldn't be much. They were running for their lives now, with the most valuable child in a twisted experiment and evidence that could bring down a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power. But as they started down the stairs, Luke suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying an eerie certainty that chilled everyone. "In my dream, this isn't how we escape. There's another way, a secret way that they don't know about." Could a 5-year-old's enhanced dreams really hold the key to their survival? Jake stared at Luke in amazement and growing dread. The child's eyes held a certainty that no 5-year-old should possess, as if he was seeing something beyond the present moment. Rex had stopped beside Luke, his ears perked forward as if he too sensed something important about what the boy was saying. "Luke," Dr. Wells said gently, crouching down to his level despite the urgent danger around them, "what do you mean by a secret way?" Luke closed his eyes for a moment, the same way adults do when they're trying to remember something important. When he opened them again, his voice carried an eerie maturity. "There's a tunnel. It starts in the basement near the big machines that make the hospital warm. It goes under the street to the building next door." Emma gasped. "The maintenance tunnels. I forgot about those. They were built in the 1950s to connect the hospital to the old medical school building across the street. Most people don't even know they exist anymore." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from above them in the stairwell. Wilson's team was getting closer, and Jake knew they had only minutes before being caught. "Can you show us how to get there?" Jake asked Luke urgently. Luke nodded with the strange confidence that had marked all his statements. "Yes, but we have to go down 2 more floors, then through the big metal door that says authorized personnel only. The tunnel entrance is behind the old boiler." They moved quickly down the stairs, Rex leading the way with his nose working constantly to detect any threats ahead of them. Martha, despite being in her 60s, kept pace with surprising determination. Emma moved like someone who had found new purpose after months of guilt and fear. As they reached the basement level, the building's mechanical sounds grew louder. Steam pipes hissed, and the air grew noticeably warmer. Luke led them confidently through a maze of corridors that Jake would never have navigated successfully on his own. "How does he know this place so well?" Dr. Wells whispered to Emma as they followed the child. "Dr. Cross used to take the children down here for special tests," Emma explained, her voice filled with regret. "He said the isolation helped with the experiments. I think Luke has been mapping escape routes in his mind for years." The realization that this little boy had been planning his own escape for so long was heartbreaking. Luke had been living in a prison disguised as medical care, and his enhanced intelligence had been working overtime to find a way out. They reached the heavy metal door Luke had described. Jake tried the handle, but it was locked with an electronic keypad. His heart sank. They were trapped. But Luke stepped forward confidently. "The code is B815, he said simply. Jake stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I watched Dr. Cross type it in during one of my treatments. My memory is really good now because of the medicine they give me." Jake punched in the code, and the door clicked open. They found themselves in a mechanical room filled with boilers, pipes, and electrical equipment. The air was thick with heat and humidity, and the noise was almost overwhelming. Luke pointed toward the far corner of the room, where an old metal grate was partially hidden behind a massive boiler. "The tunnel is behind there, but we need to move the grate. It's heavy." Jake and Dr. Wells worked together to shift the metal covering, revealing a narrow concrete tunnel that disappeared into darkness. It was just wide enough for an adult to crawl through, and the air coming from it carried the musty smell of decades of disuse. "I'll go first," Jake said, pulling out his phone's flashlight. "Rex, you stay with Luke." But as Jake prepared to enter the tunnel, Emma grabbed his arm. "Wait, there's something else I need to tell you about Luke, about all the children in the program." The urgency in her voice made everyone stop and listen. "The DNA tests," Emma continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. "Dr. Cross didn't just enhance their intelligence. He altered their genetic structure. Luke isn't entirely human anymore. None of them are." The words hit like a physical blow. Dr. Wells looked at Luke with new eyes, seeing for the first time some of the subtle differences that the experimental treatments had created. His eyes were slightly larger than normal for a child his age, and his movements had a grace and precision that seemed almost supernatural. "What do you mean, not entirely human?" Jake demanded. "The serum contains genetic material from multiple sources," Emma explained. "Animal DNA for enhanced senses, synthetic compounds for increased neural capacity, and something else that Dr. Cross never fully explained to me, something he called evolutionary acceleration." Luke listened to this conversation with the calm acceptance of someone who had already known the truth about himself. "Is that why I can hear people's thoughts sometimes?" he asked quietly. Everyone stared at him. Rex moved closer to Luke, as if the dog instinctively understood that the child was even more special than they had realized. "You can hear thoughts?" Dr. Wells asked gently. Luke nodded. "Not all the time, and not from everyone, but right now, I can hear that the bad people upstairs are really angry, and they're calling more people to help them find us." As if to confirm Luke's statement, they heard the sound of more vehicles arriving outside the building. Through a small basement window, Jake could see black SUVs pulling into the hospital parking lot. "We need to move now," Jake said urgently. They began crawling through the tunnel, single file. Jake first, then Luke, followed by Dr. Wells, Martha, Emma, and Rex bringing up the rear. The tunnel was claustrophobic and dark, filled with the echo of their breathing and the scratch of their movement against concrete. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, they emerged in the basement of the building across the street, the old medical school that had been converted into office space years ago. The basement was filled with storage boxes and abandoned furniture, but it was blessedly quiet. Luke stood up and brushed dust from his clothes with the careful precision that had become characteristic of all his movements. "We're safe here for now," he said, "but they'll figure out about the tunnel eventually." Jake pulled out his phone to call for real backup, but discovered he had no signal in the basement. They would need to get to ground level to contact the outside world. As they made their way toward the basement stairs, Emma suddenly grabbed Jake's arm again. "There's something else. Something that changes everything about what we thought we knew about this conspiracy." "What now?" Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear any more shocking revelations. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, even though they were alone. "Luke isn't Dr. Cross's success story. He's Dr. Cross's failure." Everyone stopped moving. "What do you mean?" Dr. Wells demanded. "The program wasn't designed to create super-intelligent children," Emma explained. "It was designed to create weapons, enhanced human beings who could be programmed to follow orders without question, who could infiltrate anywhere, who could kill without hesitation or remorse." Luke looked up at Emma with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than his 5 years. "But it didn't work on me, did it? I can still feel things. I still care about people." Emma nodded, tears starting to flow again. "You retained your humanity, Luke. You and 2 other children in the program. That's why Dr. Cross was planning to terminate you. You were classified as failed experiments because you couldn't be turned into weapons. The revelation was staggering. This wasn't just unethical medical research. It was an attempt to create a new form of biological warfare using children as the raw material. Who's behind this? Jake asked. This is bigger than one rogue doctor. International military contractors, Emma said. Countries that want enhanced soldiers but don't want to use their own citizens for the experiments. They funnel money through shell companies and private research institutes. Ms. Reynolds represents at least 3 different governments. Rex had been listening to all of this with the intense attention that marked his police training. Suddenly, the dog moved to a basement window and began growling softly. His enhanced senses had detected something the humans had missed. Jake joined Rex at the window and peered out carefully. What he saw made his blood freeze. The entire block was being surrounded. Police cars, unmarked vehicles, and what looked like military trucks were taking positions around both buildings. "They've found us," Jake said grimly. But Luke stepped up beside him, his enhanced vision allowing him to see details that Jake couldn't make out. "Those aren't all bad people," Luke said with certainty. "Some of those police cars have the real police in them, and there's a news truck." Jake looked more carefully and realized Luke was right. Mixed in with Wilson's tactical teams were what appeared to be legitimate law enforcement officers and media personnel. "Emma," Jake said, "when you said you tried to save Luke this morning, did you contact anyone else? Anyone outside the hospital?" Emma nodded slowly. "I sent an email to a reporter at Channel 7 News. I attached some of the research files I'd copied from Dr. Cross's computer. I thought if something happened to me, at least someone would know the truth." Luke smiled for the first time since this whole ordeal began. "That's why we're going to be okay," he said with the certainty that had marked all his predictions. "The truth is going to come out now." As if summoned by Luke's words, they heard the sound of a helicopter circling overhead. Through the basement windows, they could see the Channel 7 news chopper hovering above the hospital, filming everything that was happening below. Jake's phone suddenly buzzed with a text message that had somehow gotten through. "Officer Martinez, this is Captain Rodriguez. We have the building surrounded. Are you and the civilians safe?" Jake quickly typed back their location and status. Within minutes, they heard the sound of boots on the stairs leading down to the basement. But these weren't the threatening footsteps of Wilson's team. They moved with the measured pace of legitimate law enforcement. "Police! Officer Martinez, if you're down there, call out!" Jake recognized the voice of his captain. "We're here. 5 civilians and 1 child, all safe." The basement filled with real police officers, paramedics, and what appeared to be FBI agents. But these weren't the fake federal agents who had been hunting them. These carried proper identification and moved with the bureaucratic efficiency of actual government workers. Captain Rodriguez found Jake and immediately began assessing the situation. "Martinez, what the hell happened up there? We've got reports of shots fired, missing children, and something about illegal medical experiments." Jake quickly briefed his captain on everything they had discovered, while paramedics began checking everyone for injuries. Luke submitted to their examination with patient cooperation, though he kept Rex close by his side. "Captain," Jake said urgently, "there are other children still in danger. The tracking device shows 9 locations, and we've only accounted for Luke." Before Captain Rodriguez could respond, Luke spoke up with his characteristic certainty. "They're moving the other children right now. Dr. Cross has a backup facility about 20 miles from here. But if you don't get there in the next hour, they'll disappear forever." An FBI agent who had been listening to Luke's statement stepped forward. "Son, how do you know that?" Luke looked at the agent with eyes that held far too much knowledge for a 5-year-old. "Because I can see it happening. The medicine they gave me doesn't just make me smarter, it lets me see things that are happening in other places sometimes." The FBI agent exchanged glances with Captain Rodriguez. "We need to treat this as credible intelligence," he said. "If there are other children in immediate danger, we have to act." As law enforcement coordinated their response to rescue the other children, Dr. Wells stayed close to Luke, her medical training telling her that he would need extensive care to undo the damage that had been done to him. But she was also amazed by his resilience and strength. "Luke," she said gently, "you saved a lot of people today. You helped us understand what was really happening, and now we can help the other children too." Luke nodded solemnly. "That's what I was supposed to do. Even though Dr. Cross tried to make me into something bad, I chose to be something good instead." Rex had settled down beside Luke, his protective mission accomplished for now. The dog seemed to understand that the immediate danger had passed, but he remained alert, ready to defend Luke if any new threats emerged. Emma was being questioned by detectives about everything she knew regarding the conspiracy, but she kept looking over at Luke with a mixture of guilt and hope. She had finally done the right thing, even though it had taken her far too long to find the courage. Martha held Emma's hand as they both gave their statements. Two women who had found themselves in the middle of something far bigger and more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. As the activity in the basement continued around them, Luke suddenly looked up at Jake with a question that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his enhanced mind.
"Officer Jake," Luke said quietly, "what happens to me now? Where do I go?"
It was a question that would require answers from people far above Jake's pay grade. Luke was no longer entirely human, but he was still very much a child who needed protection, care, and love. The legal and ethical implications of his situation would probably take years to resolve. But what happens when the rescue team reaches the backup facility, and will they be too late to save the other children? The FBI tactical team moved with military precision through the night, their vehicles racing toward the coordinates Luke had provided. Agent Sarah Chen led the operation, her years of experience in child trafficking cases making her the perfect choice for this unprecedented situation. In the passenger seat, she studied the intelligence reports that had been compiled in the 3 hours since Luke's rescue. The backup facility was located in an abandoned pharmaceutical plant 20 miles outside the city. Satellite imagery showed recent activity, vehicles coming and going, lights in buildings that should have been empty, and what appeared to be a helicopter landing pad that hadn't existed on maps from 6 months ago. "Unit 1, we have visual on the target," came the voice over the radio. "Multiple vehicles in the parking area, lights on in the east wing. This place is definitely active." Agent Chen grabbed her radio. "Any sign of children being moved?" "Negative, but we're seeing adult figures moving around inside. Looks like they're in a hurry to pack something up." Back at the hospital, Luke sat in the emergency room while doctors ran tests to assess the damage done by years of experimental treatments. He remained calm throughout the medical examination, but his enhanced senses kept him connected to events happening far away. "They're scared," Luke said suddenly, looking up at Dr. Wells, who was reviewing his test results. "The people at the other place. They know we escaped, and they're trying to hide the evidence." Dr. Wells had stopped being surprised by Luke's unusual insights. The blood tests were revealing the full extent of the genetic modifications that had been done to him. His brain showed activity patterns unlike anything in medical literature, and his sensory capabilities were off the charts. "Luke," Dr. Wells said gently, "can you tell if the other children are okay?" Luke closed his eyes, his face scrunching up in concentration, the way children do when they're thinking really hard. "There are 6 of them there now. 2 are really sick. One of them is stopping." The word stopping sent a chill through everyone in the room. Dr. Wells immediately called Agent Chen's team with Luke's information. At the pharmaceutical plant, Agent Chen received the update just as her team was preparing to breach the building. "We have intelligence that 6 children are inside, 2 in critical condition, 1 possibly dying. Medical team, be ready for immediate trauma response." The tactical team moved swiftly through the building, following the layout that Emma had provided from her memory of Dr. Cross's files. The facility was much larger than the hospital operation, with multiple labs, holding areas, and what appeared to be surgical suites. They found the children in a secure wing on the 2nd floor. The scene that greeted them was something out of a nightmare. 6 children, ranging in age from 3 to 8, were connected to IV lines in a sterile room that looked more like a laboratory than a medical facility. Each child was unconscious, their small bodies hooked up to monitors that tracked not just vital signs, but brain activity, neural enhancement levels, and something labeled as compliance indicators. "Jesus Christ," whispered one of the tactical officers. "They're treating them like lab rats." Dr. Amanda Foster, the emergency pediatrician who had accompanied the team, immediately began triaging the children. The 2 that Luke had identified as really sick were indeed in critical condition, their bodies showing signs of severe reaction to whatever compounds had been injected into them. "This one's crashing," Dr. Foster called out, working over a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "I need immediate transport to Children's Hospital. Her neurological system is shutting down." As the medical team worked frantically to stabilize the children, Agent Chen's investigators began documenting the evidence they found throughout the facility. What they discovered painted a picture of horror that extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. Dr. Cross's operation wasn't just creating enhanced children, it was part of a global network trading in modified human beings. Files found in his office contained correspondence with buyers from multiple countries, price lists for different types of enhancements, and shipping manifests that treated children like commercial products. Agent Chen called one of the investigators from a computer terminal. "You need to see this. There are records of over 200 children who have gone through this program in the past 5 years." The number was staggering. 200 children, stolen from their families or taken from vulnerable situations, subjected to experimental treatments, and then sold to the highest bidder. Many of the records showed that children who didn't respond well to the treatments were marked as disposed of. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. In Dr. Cross's personal files, they found communications with a network that reached to the highest levels of government and military organizations worldwide. The enhanced children weren't just being sold as weapons, they were being placed in adoptive families connected to intelligence agencies, where they would grow up as sleeper agents with capabilities far beyond normal human limits. Agent Chen realized they had uncovered something that would reshape understanding of international espionage and human trafficking. This wasn't just a rogue medical experiment. It was a systematic program to create a new generation of enhanced humans for military and intelligence purposes. Back at the hospital, Luke suddenly sat up in his hospital bed, his eyes wide with alarm. "Something's wrong," he said urgently. "Dr. Cross isn't at the building where they found the other children. He's somewhere else, and he's really angry." Jake, who had been staying close to Luke throughout the medical examinations, immediately contacted Agent Chen. "We may have a problem. Luke says Dr. Cross isn't at the facility." "That's confirmed," Agent Chen replied grimly. "We've secured the children and arrested the staff we found here, but Dr. Cross, Ms. Reynolds, and several key figures are missing. We think they had an escape plan." Luke's enhanced abilities were picking up something else. "He's not trying to run away," Luke said with the certainty that had marked all his insights. "He's coming back. He wants to stop the other children from talking about what happened to them." The implications were terrifying. If Dr. Cross was planning to eliminate the witnesses to his operation, then all the children who had been rescued were still in danger. "We need to get Luke somewhere safe," Jake said. "If Dr. Cross is planning retaliation, Luke will be his primary target." But Luke shook his head. "I can't hide. If I run away, Dr. Cross will hurt the other children to make me come back. I have to help catch him." Dr. Wells looked at this 5-year-old boy who was talking about facing down dangerous criminals and felt her heart break. Luke had been forced to grow up far too quickly, but his courage and determination were inspiring everyone around him. "Luke," Dr. Wells said carefully, "how can you help catch Dr. Cross?" Luke's response was simple but chilling. "Because I know how he thinks now. The treatments he gave me didn't just make me smarter, they made me understand how his mind works. I can predict what he's going to do next." Agent Chen's voice came over Jake's radio with urgency. "All units, we have reports of a helicopter approaching the hospital. Unknown aircraft, not responding to air traffic control." Luke nodded grimly. "That's him. He's coming here because he thinks I'm the most dangerous threat to his operation. He knows that as long as I'm alive and can tell people what he did, his whole network will be exposed." The hospital immediately went into lockdown. Security teams took positions throughout the building, while Luke was moved to a secure area in the basement. But even as they prepared for Dr. Cross's arrival, Luke continued to provide intelligence that proved invaluable. "He has 6 people with him," Luke said, his eyes closed in concentration. "They're not just going to try to take me, they're going to try to destroy all the evidence we found. And they have something that will make everyone forget what happened." "What do you mean, make everyone forget?" Agent Chen asked over the radio. Luke's answer sent chills through everyone listening. Dr. Cross developed a compound that can erase specific memories. He was planning to use it on all the children before selling them, so they wouldn't remember their real families or what was done to them. If he releases it in the hospital's air system, everyone who knows about the program will forget it ever happened. The stakes had just gotten impossibly higher. Not only were they dealing with a rescue operation and criminal conspiracy, but they were facing the possibility that all evidence of Dr. Cross's crimes could be wiped from the minds of every witness. "How do we stop it?" Agent Chen demanded. Luke opened his eyes, and for a moment, he looked like the small child he really was underneath all the enhancements. I don't know, he admitted, but Rex does. Everyone looked at the German Shepherd, who had remained by Luke's side throughout everything. The dog's ears were perked forward, and he was staring intently at the ceiling, as if he could hear something no one else could detect. Rex can smell the compound, Luke explained. It has a scent that normal people can't detect, but enhanced senses can pick it up. If Dr. Cross tries to release it, Rex will know where it's coming from. Jake knelt down beside his partner. Good boy, Rex. You've been the hero of this whole thing, haven't you? Rex wagged his tail briefly, but his attention remained focused on potential threats. The dog had appointed himself as Luke's permanent guardian, and nothing was going to distract him from that mission. The helicopter sound grew louder, and through the basement windows they could see spotlights sweeping across the hospital grounds. Dr. Cross had arrived, and he was bringing everything he had for one final attempt to destroy the evidence of his crimes. Luke, Agent Chen said over the radio, we're going to do everything we can to protect you and stop Dr. Cross, but I need you to stay hidden no matter what happens, okay? Luke shook his head with the stubborn determination of a child who had made up his mind. I can't hide anymore. Dr. Cross hurt too many children, and if I don't help stop him now, he'll just start over somewhere else with new children. The wisdom and moral courage coming from this 5-year-old was humbling to every adult who heard it. Luke had been through horrors that would have broken many grown men, but instead of being destroyed by the experience, he had emerged with an unshakable commitment to protecting other children from the same fate. Besides, Luke added with a small smile, I already know how this ends. I saw it in my dreams last night. Dr. Cross thinks he's going to win, but he doesn't understand something important about the enhancements he gave me. What's that? Dr. Wells asked. Luke's smile grew wider, and for the first time since this ordeal began, he looked like a normal, mischievous 5-year-old. He made me too smart for him to outsmart. The sound of the helicopter landing echoed through the hospital, followed by the crash of doors being forced open and the shouts of Dr. Cross's team as they began their assault on the building. But in the basement, a little boy with extraordinary abilities and his canine guardian were preparing to make their final stand against the monsters who had tried to steal his childhood and the futures of countless other children. The battle for Luke's freedom and the exposure of the most horrific conspiracy in modern history was about to reach its climax. What's the one thing Dr. Cross doesn't know about Luke that will ultimately lead to his downfall? The hospital shook as Dr. Cross's team blasted through the main entrance. Emergency alarms blared throughout the building, while security teams took defensive positions. But Luke remained calm in the basement, his enhanced mind processing information at a speed that amazed everyone around him. He's splitting his team, Luke said with his eyes closed, tracking the intruders through senses no normal child possessed. 3 people are going to the computer servers to destroy the digital evidence. 2 are heading to the morgue to get the physical files Emma hid. And Dr. Cross is coming down here with 1 guard. Agent Chen's voice crackled over the radio. How can you possibly know their exact movements? Luke opened his eyes, and they seemed to glow with an inner light that hadn't been there before his treatments. Because Dr. Cross made one mistake when he enhanced me. He gave me the ability to connect with electronic systems. I can feel the hospital's security cameras, the badge readers, even the cell phones they're carrying. Jake stared at Luke in amazement. You can access the hospital's entire network? Luke nodded. Dr. Cross thought he was just making me smarter, but the neural enhancements connected my brain to electromagnetic fields. I can see through every camera in the building and track every electronic device. This revelation changed everything. Luke wasn't just a victim or even a witness. He was the most powerful weapon they had against Dr. Cross's final assault. Luke, Agent Chen said urgently, can you help us coordinate our response? Can you tell us exactly where everyone is? Better than that, Luke replied, his young voice carrying confidence that belied his age. I can control the building's systems. I can lock doors, turn off lights, even trigger the emergency protocols. Dr. Wells watched in fascination as Luke's enhanced abilities manifested in ways that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. The child's brain was interfacing with technology in a manner that seemed almost supernatural. Rex suddenly perked up, his nose working furiously. The dog began pacing near the basement's air vents, whining with increasing urgency. He's detecting the memory compound, Luke said, his face growing serious. Dr. Cross is trying to pump it through the ventilation system, but I can stop it. Luke closed his eyes again, his face scrunching up with concentration. Throughout the hospital, computerized systems began responding to his mental commands. Air circulation systems shut down, emergency fans reversed direction, and sealed blast doors activated to contain the chemical threat. "Systems locked," Luke announced. "Dr. Cross can't spread the compound now, but he's going to be really angry when he realizes what happened." As if summoned by Luke's words, they heard footsteps on the basement stairs. Dr. Cross's voice echoed down the stairwell, no longer carrying any pretense of professional courtesy. "Luke, I know you're down there, you little freak. You've ruined everything, but I'm going to fix that right now." The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the heavier tread of Dr. Cross's guard. Luke positioned himself behind Rex, who had taken a protective stance at the bottom of the stairs. "Luke," Dr. Cross called out as he came into view, "you don't understand what you've done. The enhancements I gave you were a gift. You could have been part of something greater than human civilization has ever achieved." Dr. Cross looked different now that his mask of respectability had been stripped away. His eyes held the fanatic gleam of someone who had convinced himself that his monstrous actions were justified by a greater purpose. "You hurt children," Luke said simply, his young voice carrying more moral authority than Dr. Cross's elaborate justifications. "You took them away from their families and did terrible things to them. That's not a gift. That's evil." Dr. Cross laughed bitterly. "Evil? You naive child. I was creating the future of humanity. Enhanced intelligence, superior physical capabilities, the ability to interface with technology. These children would have grown up to solve problems that normal humans never could. By turning them into weapons," Luke replied. "By selling them to people who wanted to use them to hurt other people." "Weapons?" Dr. Cross shook his head. "Tools of progress. Luke, you have abilities that could reshape the world. With your enhanced cognition and technological interface capabilities, you could advance human knowledge by centuries." Luke stood up straighter, and despite his small size, his presence seemed to fill the basement. "I choose what to do with my abilities, and I choose to use them to protect people, not hurt them." Rex growled deep in his throat, sensing that the confrontation was reaching a critical point. The dog's police training told him that Dr. Cross represented a deadly threat to the child he was protecting. Dr. Cross pulled out a small device that looked like a medical injector. "This contains a concentrated dose of the neural control compound, one injection, and you'll become compliant and forget all of this happened. We can start over, Luke. I can help you reach your full potential." "No," Luke said firmly. "I won't let you hurt any more children." As Dr. Cross stepped forward with the injector, several things happened simultaneously. Rex launched himself at the doctor with the trained precision of a police attack dog. Luke's enhanced abilities triggered every alarm system in the hospital, flooding the basement with emergency lighting and deafening sirens. And Agent Chen's tactical team, guided by Luke's real-time intelligence, breached the basement from multiple entry points. Dr. Cross's guard went down under the combined assault of federal agents, while Dr. Cross himself was tackled by Rex before he could use the neural control injector. The device shattered on the concrete floor, its contents spreading harmlessly instead of entering Luke's bloodstream. "Vincent Cross," Agent Chen announced as her team secured the scene, "you're under arrest for human trafficking, illegal human experimentation, conspiracy, and about 50 other charges that will keep you in prison for the rest of your life." As Dr. Cross was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Luke with a mixture of rage and twisted admiration. "You could have been perfect," he said. "You could have been the first of a new species." Luke looked at him with the same calm certainty that had marked all his statements throughout this ordeal. "I'm not a new species, Dr. Cross. I'm just a kid who wants other kids to be safe." The simple humanity of Luke's response seemed to hit Dr. Cross harder than any accusation or threat could have. For the first time, the doctor seemed to realize the full horror of what he had done, not to specimens or subjects, but to children who deserved protection and love. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Dr. Cross's conspiracy was revealed to the public. The story became international news, leading to investigations in dozens of countries and the rescue of children from similar programs around the world. Ms. Reynolds and her network of international buyers were tracked down and arrested, their plans for enhanced human weapons destroyed forever. The 6 children rescued from the backup facility slowly recovered under specialized medical care. Like Luke, they retained the enhancements that had been forced upon them, but counseling and support helped them understand that their abilities were gifts to be used for good, not weapons to be controlled by others. Luke himself became something of a medical marvel, working with doctors and researchers who were trying to understand the extent of his enhancements, while ensuring that no one could ever again use children for such experiments. His ability to interface with electronic systems proved invaluable in tracking down other victims of similar programs. Dr. Wells adopted Luke officially, giving him the stable, loving home he had never known. Rex, of course, came with them, the bond between the boy and the dog having become unbreakable during their shared ordeal. On quiet evenings, Luke would sometimes sit with Rex in their backyard, using his enhanced abilities to monitor global communications and identify other children who needed help. He had chosen to use his extraordinary gifts to become a guardian for vulnerable children around the world. "Rex," Luke would say, scratching behind the dog's ears, "you saved me first, before anyone else even knew I needed saving." Rex would wag his tail and lean against Luke, both of them understanding that their partnership had become something special. A boy with extraordinary abilities and a dog with an extraordinary heart, working together to make sure no other children would suffer, as Luke had suffered. Emma Thompson was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, and she dedicated her life to working with organizations that protected children from trafficking and exploitation. Martha continued working at the hospital, but she also became an advocate for stronger oversight of medical research involving vulnerable populations. Jake Martinez and Rex received commendations for their role in exposing the conspiracy, but Jake always insisted that the real hero was Rex, whose trained instincts had detected the danger that no human could see. The story of how a police dog's bark led to the discovery of one of the most horrific conspiracies in modern history became a reminder that sometimes the most important truths are revealed by those who see the world differently than the rest of us. Luke grew up to become exactly what he had promised, a protector of children, using his unique abilities to identify and stop threats that normal law enforcement couldn't detect. And Rex remained by his side throughout it all, the faithful guardian who had recognized Luke's humanity when others saw only an experiment. Years later, when Luke was asked about his extraordinary childhood and the abilities that had been forced upon him, he would always give the same answer. Dr. Cross thought he was creating a weapon, but he accidentally created something much more powerful, a child who refused to lose his humanity. The bond between a boy and his dog had saved not just Luke, but countless other children around the world, and that bond continued to protect the innocent, proving that love and loyalty are more powerful than any enhancement science could ever create. If this incredible story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with everyone you know. Comment below and tell us what part of Luke and Rex's story affected you the most. We read every single comment and love hearing from our amazing community. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these powerful true stories that prove heroes come in all forms, sometimes even with 4 paws and a badge. Where are you listening from today? Let us know in the comments.